Hello, this is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 145 of Gaming with Grief, and I'm calling this episode Before Your Eyes Spoilercast, because this is a spoilercast of Before Your Eyes, but I want to remind you guys that this podcast will hit my website, www.gamingwithgrief.com, Monday morning at 7 a.m. Please go there and leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the show. Or you can write to me at gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. Give me a comment. Let me know if there's a game you want me to review, what you think of the show, how you heard of the show, or if you have a question, you can leave it there. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes, the Google Play Store, or I'm on Spotify. Just search for the Gaming with Grief podcast with Joseph Carlson. And you can find me on Twitter at JustLittleJoe. So, so let me just start out by saying this is a full spoiler cast for Before Your Eyes. It's titled that. I said that in the beginning. I'm saying it again. This is a spoiler cast for Before Your Eyes. If you don't want to be spoiled, turn away. Or just, hold this episode in your backlog until, you finish the game. So let me just start out by saying I heard this game was emotional. A lot of people said, on podcasts that I listen to, other gaming podcasts, said you should really play this game. And I was like, wow, that sounds interesting. And so I had it in my review log, sat down this morning and bought it for $10 and thought, I'll sit here. I heard it's really short, 2 hours. Maybe I'll play a little bit, or play it all. We'll see. And then, write up something for the podcast. And I was not prepared to cry. Right on the edge. So to start out, like in episode 144, when I gave my impressions, you're basically living Benny Bryn. You're basically going through his life. I hope I'm saying his last name right. But you're basically going through his life. You are being ferreted through basically the River of Styx. There's a bunch of things that look like marbles floating in the water. The ferryman tells you, I saw something in you that I didn't see in anybody else. And you see that big tower, and you see this massive skyscraper in the distance that is, it's like this monolithic black skyscraper kind of with like red lights. He said, that's who you go to tell. You basically defend your life. So tell me the story. I'll be able to tell them a great story, and you'll be able to move on. If not, you're kind of going to be where everybody else is here. You're going to be these marbles floating in this ocean for eternity. There's some seagulls that are hanging out on the ship. They squat him. Later you find out that they're lying seagulls. If you lie too much, they make a lot of noise. And just like in my impressions podcast last episode where they talked about blinking, or at least I talked about blinking and how it moves the plot forward, this was the most frustrating part of the game, and not in a negative way. But like I said in my impressions cast, the moment people are in this incredibly deep conversation with you and you blink away, it's heartbreaking to be like, I can't go back there. I can't. I mean, obviously you could play the game again or maybe the chapter again. I'm not sure. But like at this moment, I can't go back and play. And at first, the game starts innocuous as nothing. Just a normal, nominal game. You're a kid. Your mother was a composer, but she kind of got a job. It sounds like she wasn't as talented as she needed to be. She makes a phone call to try to get some job, like composing on the phone. One of her mentors says it's a derivative, and she says, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to my piece. And so it seems like from there she just gets a desk job. But she is talented with the piano. And she, when you're very young, teaches you how to play the piano, but then starts pushing you to play the piano more. And you find out later that her father basically did the same, that he pushed her to play the piano and that he was the strong silent type and very, it's one of those things where I guess it's an old stereotype, but I guess if you don't succeed, you push your kids to succeed, I'm terrible at football. I didn't make it. I didn't make the team. My son, daughter, whoever is good at football, they're going to make the team. I'm going to make them practice as hard as possible to be, do as best I can. And maybe a little bit too much. And that kind of happens in the game. Your mom pushes you over and over again to practice piano, and you don't get in. She takes you to a private school for an audition. You don't make it because at that moment you have a choice to stay up or go to sleep so you can get you're well rested for the recital, the practice recital you're doing, or the interview basically, or you can go meet your neighbor girl Chloe, who's very nice. She says, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the beach. Let's hang out and sleep at the beach at night and talk." There's no kissing, there's no like force whatever, but you do find out you really like her and she likes you because she says something about she makes fun of you. You can't draw. She sees all like you can't really play, all this kind of stuff. But it's interesting, you look and blink. And there were several times up to this point where I had blinked and missed conversations, and I just it annoyed me. But it starts kind of normal enough. Your mom's kind of, I don't know if normal, but she's forcing you to do something maybe you don't want to do. But then there's a revelation that you're sick, and I thought, oh no, and that's when the inkling of a tear comes, and you think, oh. So you go to the doctor. The doctor says, "Listen, you'll be fine. You just need to stay in bed for a bit, to kind of, quarantine basically. Just stay, rest." Talks to the mom. He says, "Listen, can I talk to you? There's some clerical stuff I need to talk to you about." The mom says, "Sure." And being an adult, maybe it works on a kid. Hearing that conversation, something's wrong, right? Well, you stay in your room for a year, you discover later, because you go back to the ferryman, back in the real world, quote unquote, not your memories. And he says, "Yeah, you were in bed a year, but at least you learned something like that." Then you go back to your past. And what happens is, in the year that you were, in your room, basically with this disease, they don't say what it is. You teach yourself to draw, or maybe you had an aptitude to draw and you actually had time to sit down and do it. That part's amazing. You draw better and better pictures. You win awards. You go to art school. You have a mentor. You do more there. Then you have a gallery showing. Again, these are blink flashes of your life. You have a gallery showing. You make money. Your mentor even mentions that he calls you on the phone and congratulates you on your gallery thing and says, they all made fun of you, but not only are you happy now because you're doing what you want, you're painting. You're rich. So, laugh, the joke's on them. And that was really amazing. But then you go back, you meet your old neighbor, Chloe. She comes to your gallery show and says, "Oh my God, I can't believe I ran into you. This is amazing. I can't believe you did all this." Right before this, though, or a few years before you go to art school, your mom passes away. She is sick, and you don't know why or how, but she passes away, and it's sad. Your dad decides to move out of the house, and then you have like 6 months where you don't. Well, that's like right after this moment. So you have you're basically very successful artist. You have the gallery showing. Your mom gets sick and passes away. Then you kind of mentally and physically shut down for 6 months. You know this because your mentor calls and says, "What are you doing? Where's the great Benny Bryn? Everybody's asking about him. You've returned my call in 6 months. You're washed up. You're nothing." Kind of turning against you. Then you go back to the ferryman, and he says, "Stop lying to me. What really happened?" First, he starts out by, you're getting closer to the building. And he says, "Tell me your story. Were you lonely? Were you happy?" And you have to look up his hands and blink at a response. And I was very lonely because I didn't really have any friends in the game except for Chloe, my neighbor, and my mom forced me to play piano. So I said I was lonely. I grew up in an isolated town. Meanwhile, the ferryman turns around as they're getting closer and closer to this skyscraper, and he's yelling your story at the skyscraper. This boy was a man who did the best he could, but his parents wanted more for him than the way he had, and he didn't make it as a pianist and became a world-renowned artist. Well, as he's telling the story, the seagulls are getting louder and louder and louder. And he starts squawking at them and finally breaks down. The ferryman does. Kneels and then turns and looks at you and says, "Don't lie to me. Tell me what really happened. This is how you defend your life. How dare you come here?" He said, "The only reason they get loud," and I'm paraphrasing all this, "the only reason they get loud is because you're lying to me." So then you have to tell the real story of your life. And there were scenes that you couldn't sit through. You just blinked and you would miss them. Obviously, the name of the game. But you knew something was off about the scene. Either it was dark, you heard a phone call, and you couldn't go towards it because you blinked in time, or you were moving really slow, you were trying to sneak, and obviously just naturally you blink and miss it. There's one thing where you're in the kitchen, it looks like you're getting something to eat at night, and you hear noise, and it doesn't sound good. It sounds like a growl outside. Quick aside, in the middle of your 7 or 8 as a kid, you find a kitten. The kitten has kittens. So what happens is when the ferryman says, "You have lied to me. Tell me the real story of your life." You flash back to the scene with the kittens, and this is when you can hold on, and if you don't blink, you actually see what happens. The timer runs out, like I said in my Impressions podcast, and you see the whole scene plays out. And what happens is apparently you're in the kitchen, probably getting something to eat, like a night snack or something, and the kittens, of the kitten that you have, the kittens got out, and they were killed by coyotes, and you see that. It's terrible. And you're like, oh no, something's wrong. And I think they're trying to show you is there's some scenes that you blink and turned away, but now you have to look. There's another scene where your parents say, it's right after their doctor, and they say, well, we can't hear him talking, but like, how is he going to stay home for a year? And then one says, I don't know, but we can't tell him how bad it is. We can't let him know how sick he really is. You know, what's going to happen? What's he going to do? So then there's another scene where you go in an MRI machine, and it's bad. Then you kind of cut back to being in bed and deciding to draw and paint, and that's pretty real. Like the ferryman doesn't interrupt you. You go through that. But then it cuts off again, and the ferryman's like, no, really tell me what happened. So it cuts back to a scene where mom gives you a console, and she said, listen, you're in bed. You should do something with your time. At least play this. You know, your dad got it for you or whatever. But she's like, how about this? And she gives you a typewriter. And she says, why don't you tell me a story? Because you got to do something while you're laying in bed. And you answer her by typing, which is pretty neat. You know, you move your hand over the keyboard, and the keys move, and then it makes a predetermined whatever. And it's got the old style typewriter. And you're like, king, king, shing, king, 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 shing, you know. Anyway, you start writing this story. And then the ferryman interrupts you again, and you go in the building. You're in the skyscraper going up a large elevator, and he says, okay, this is it. This is your last chance. So really be real right now. You flash back to the thing. Come to find out, you go in an MRI machine, and you were terminally ill. You died when you were 12, and the sickness is just totally taking your whole body. The sickness is characterized by a big pulsing red something that's just pulsing. You try to take pills. You try to eat. You can't. Sometimes when you go to look at them or blink at them to select them, those choices fade away because that stuff doesn't work anymore. And here's the point where like the waterworks really started. So at the end, you go in the skyscraper. The ferryman's like, this is it. Here's the person that will judge your life. I've seen a lot of different things. It's something that meant a lot to you. Well, it's a giant cat. A big cat that looks really adorable and beautiful with like these extra tentacle eyes, but it's really plushy and amazing. Anyway, it sits there and he's yelling the story of your life, right? But you see the symbol to blink. And what happens is you blink and you write in right before this scene, you wrote a story to your mom saying, basically, my mom was mean. She made me study piano and I didn't want to, and I just feel lonely. Well, what happened was your mom read the story and felt really bad. So as you're literally on your deathbed, your mom comes in and says, I read your story. I love you, but let me read you a story that I wrote. And she tells this story. And if you blink, it goes back to the ferryman who is yelling this story at the cat, I'll call it, the judge. He's yelling this story at the judge about how you were misunderstood and you knew you were on your deathbed, but you decided to write the story that you wanted to have, not the one that happened. So you made this up so you could have a life because you knew you were dying. And immediately when he started yelling the story, I blinked again and listened to my mom sitting next to me reading the whole story. And I tried it once or twice to go back and forth. But once I realized that's how it worked, I blinked again and listened to the mom tell me the story of how she thought I was an amazing person. And I did the best I could. And that I was the apple of her eye. And that, you know, it isn't, none of this is, my fault. And that she loved me very much. And she's breaking up while she's reading the story. And I'm breaking up while she's reading me the story. And then, so that was a really rough way to start a morning. Because I started this thing at like 7 in the morning. I thought, no big deal. I'll just play this quick game and write some notes down. And it'll be good for the podcast. Wow. Very few people have talked about this game. Again, the podcast I listen to, some people have mentioned it. But I want to be really clear. This is a very powerful game, and I would like to hear more about the writing process and stuff like that. Because not to say that you can't write anything, write what you know and all that. And not that you can't come up with these things, but this is really where art can articulate a part of life. Like, I was really, feeling everything that they were saying. The voice acting was amazing. You're obviously a silent protagonist. But especially towards the end when your mom is saying, I love you so much, and I'm sorry, basically, and again, I'm paraphrasing, I'm pulling this out, and I'm interpreting the meaning of this. But for that moment and the twist to be like, no, you died when you were 11 or 12, you wrote this whole story so you could have a life because you knew that there was no end to it. Like, this is how it was going to end. It's magical. And I hope more people will play it. I haven't really heard any. I need to look. I usually don't look at other reviews until I do my review. But I definitely, now that I posted my review, want to look around for some Spoilercast or something like that, because this game is very special and it's very emotional. If you have kids, I don't know if I can really recommend this game because obviously the kids are in peril in this game, as I've just said. So, man, this is one that I just kept thinking about all day. I actually went and saw another movie today, and it was really good. I saw the Uncharted movie. It was enjoyable. I know there's been kind of some mixed messages about it, but I thought it was good. I told my wife when we went and saw it, listen, I'm not expecting this Uncharted movie to be 10 out of 10. I just want to eat a lot of popcorn and see some cool action. And that's exactly what the movie delivered. There was enough action. There was popcorn. It was great. 10 out of 10 in that respect. But anyway, I kept thinking about this game before your eyes while I was watching the movie. And it just blew my mind. So I cannot recommend this game enough. I know I said Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is probably going to be on my who gives a crap game of the year list because my podcast plays old games and no one listens to my podcast. But I will say that Before Your Eyes is a newer game that I've played that will definitely be on that list at the beginning of next year because, again, just like Hellblade, and I spoke about Hellblade the other day to somebody, I'm still thinking about this game. So I guess that's the highest thing you could say probably about art is when it stays with you and you think about it and stuff like that. So, I think short and sweet is probably the best. And with that, I will leave you guys to it. Have a good week. But I want to remind you guys before we leave to go to that this podcast will hit my website, www.gamewithgrief.com, Monday morning at 7 a.m. Please go there and let me know what you think of the show. Leave a comment, something like that. Or you can go to gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. Go there, leave me an email. Let me know what you think of the show. If there's a game you want to talk about, leave it there. If you have a suggestion how to make the show better, please leave it there. Or you can go to I'm at Just Little Joe on Twitter. Go there. Leave me a thing if you heard of the show, something like that. Or you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes, the Google Play Store, or Spotify. So please go to those places. Interact with me and the pod. Let me know what you think. I've got some new listeners lately, so thank you so much for the people that have tuned in and things like that. But I think I'm going to leave you guys with that, and I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.